So, in the, shall we say, the English newspapers, we don't tend to hear that too much about far right extremists. You tend to get your Tommy Robinson, maybe your Paul Goldings every so once in a while. But this is, I think, quite significant. This comes from the Daily Record, and this the headline of this is "Terror Expert Warns Far-Right Extremists Are a Clear and Present Threat in Scotland." And I found this quite worrying, shall we say. But there you go. We'll go through the article because I think it's very, very good. And it shows you the level of infiltration and, worrying, shall we say, trends that are going on in Scotland. And it's not just Scotland. I guarantee you, if there was a similar study carried out, in for the rest of the UK, I guarantee you this would have very similar, if not exact, findings. So I think this is just important, not just focusing on one part of the country, Scotland, but to really bring attention to the whole of the country, as well as not what's just happening here, but all around the world. We are seeing rise of far-right groups. So far-right extremists are becoming a clear and present danger to Scotland, according to two of the world's leading terrorism experts. Professor Martha Crenshaw and Dr. Tim Wilson said that the right-wing fanatics are gathering momentum across Europe and the UK. The groups live by a creed of bile and hate and spout views that would have been unacceptable just 5 years ago. In the rapidly changing political landscape, they are developing a greater feeling of legitimacy and are being emboldened by more conservative leaders and doctrines. Who did we have a conversation with? Must have been a couple of months ago. To me, that's very worrying. It's true. These people are being emboldened to come out, and the problem is they go on and they're recruiting, and these movements are getting bigger. And of course, if you know anything about or read any of the literature or studies about far-right movements and what they intend to do, is that they intend to grow secretly and quietly. Now, the big thing is you've got to bring attention to these people, because the more attention you bring to them, the more people see them for what they are, and the more people are repulsed by their ideas and what they plan to do. And then you can bring people out of those movements because they realize, oh my God, what was I supporting? But there you go. So the news comes. Oh dear. The news comes in the wake of a series of Daily Record articles that expose the rise of the right-wing hate groups across Scotland. We revealed how Hitler-worshipping goons took to the streets in Glasgow in a bid to lure youngsters into their sick cult. Bigots were pictured giving Nazi salutes outside the city chambers. Professor Crenshaw, and a senior fellow at Stanford University in the US, is one of the world's most respected international security experts. The award-winning author and academic told the Record there is much more concern with the far right in the US and the UK and other countries as well. There is now greater feeling of legitimacy on people who feel this might feel this way. There has been a normalization of right-wing sort of attitudes. It is a general wave of right-wing populism where political parties, even if they might not be in power, openly state views that a few years ago we would have found objectionable. Now, for instance, it is acceptable to express the anti-Muslim sentiment or anti-Semitic sentiment or a majority versus minority sentiments. It is regarded by some people as more acceptable than have been in the past. And speaking about the possible threat to Scotland, Professor Crenshaw added that terrorism is extremely unpredictable because it is not centralised or directed or organised. Instead, it is homegrown and semi-spontaneous. It is very difficult to predict where it is going to come from, and the authorities don't have much lead time. If anything happens in Scotland, it would be a very small group violence that would be a short in the planning and could be very disruptive at aimed at soft civilian targets and very difficult to protect against. The Professor Crenshaw added, Professor Crenshaw spoke from St Andrews University this week, and that were the counter-terrorism specialists and were joined forces to discuss future threats. The conference was also included the former bosses of MI5 and marked the 25th anniversary of the University Centre for Study of Terrorism and Political Violence. The centre, which is based at the School of the International Relations and investigates the causes and consequences of terrorism, was founded by 1994 by Paul Wilkinson and Bruce Homeforth. Dr. Tim Wilson of the Institute, the director of it, said, who organised the conference, told us that the far right is going to be of concern for a good while. It doesn't take that many people acting on that sort of rhetoric to change the picture. Think of the impact of the Joe Cox murder south of the border. He explained the advancement of social media has given fresh incentives to terrorists, adding that the mosque attack at Christchurch was a game changer. When Kennedy was shot in 1963, within about 6 hours, 99.7% of the people surveyed had heard about it. In 2019, there was a live-streamed massacre. There is a relentless acceleration of the way in which you can communicate and the use of violence that changes its impact and increases the incentives for people. And so that, again, I can't disagree with what he said there. It is very, very worrying. But I just want to go over before we go over this, because this is the Daily Record's, what they say, this is their article for exposing the far right. There has been, I think, very little of this by national newspapers, and I think that national newspapers and other organisations need to actually start to weed out these far right people and their views. Otherwise, we are going to have some very serious consequences. Because look, all these far right views have one end game. There is no other way these go, and it's basically minorities bad. They're coming to get you. What are you going to do? Sooner or later, someone is going to act on that fear and impulse that they've been done, and we've seen it already happen. God forbid it should ever happen in this country, but and it has almost happened. I think it was not last year, the year before. We had 7. Was it 7? I can't remember. 7 or 6 actual reported far right terrorist incidents. So this is something that we have to take very, very seriously. So this is how the Daily Record has exposed far right extremism in Scotland. The Daily Record has led the way in exposing far right groups in Scotland. In March, we told how extremist Jim Dawson, the former second in command of the British Nationalist Party, was branded atrocious for trying to benefit from the Brexit chaos. Dawson from Ardleigh was slammed for his campaign to get far-right activist Tommy Robinson back on social media after a court had banned him. We revealed that Dawson had links to loyalist paramilitaries and is an anti-abortion militant. In July, we told how an extremist mob dubbed hipster fascist selected a whites only as it gave out meals to homeless people. See, that's how some of these groups work. They appear to be doing good, but when they're only giving out to white people, then you start to see where their agenda is. This is generation identity. Members wore branded yellow jackets as they spoke to rough sleepers on Glasgow's Bruton Street. The group's appearance, which bucks the right-wing trend of shaven-haired thugs from groups such as the English Defence League and National Action, has been led to the nickname of hipster fascism. And that's another part of the thing. They know what people think when they think people think, fascists. So what they do is they buck the trend. They dress different. They wear suits. They change their language. They tone it in a different way. This is why you've seen an increase in what we call dog whistling, which again is something that I think we're going to have to discuss. And PewDiePie, shall we say, documentary that he released. But yeah, there you go. That's something for another video, I think. It was an accusation. It was accused of using modern language. He says it like exactly here. It was accused of using modern branding and coded language to normalise extremist views. And again, this is all part of their game plan. The Scottish branch of Generation Identity, whose Austrian leader Martin Sellner was denied entry into the UK amid counter-terrorism concerns, was photographed distributing food on the streets to white men and women. The news came 3 years after neo-Nazi group National Action used the slogan "Hitler was right" as it bragged about setting up a food bank for whites only in Glasgow. Last December, Generation Identity tried to recruit at Scottish universities, and it put up posters at the University of Glasgow and Glasgow Caledonian University. The universities removed them, and a probe was launched, and police of Scotland were informed. So, as you can see, there is bizarrely a lot of right-wing activity going on in Scotland. So it's not just Scotland we need to be worried about, it's the rest of the UK as well. Because, as I said there, the logical end for a lot of these people is to go out and attack the very minorities that they demonise, that they hate. And that is where that hate and vitriol leads. And we have to start exposing these people. We have to start talking about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and start to show people who these people are. They're just, they are fascists, but we've got to be careful, we've got to act fast, and we've got to be smart about how we do it, because if sometimes you play their game, then you're playing right into their hands as well. So, yeah, hopefully that will not be the case for too much longer, but I suspect it will be for quite some time to come, unfortunately.